Charleston, South Carolina. A night that would change everything. The sound of crystal shattering echoed through Chez Laurent like a gunshot. Lily, May Thornton stood frozen, watching the $1,000 Bordeaux wine cascade down the pristine white shirt of William Will Ashford Blackwell III, staining not just the Egyptian cotton fabric, but apparently his entire dignity as an heir. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Will rose slowly, his voice low and carrying the kind of controlled fury that made CEOs tremble in boardrooms. At 28, he was everything Lily despised. Sculpted jaw, glacial blue eyes that seemed to assess a person's worth in dollars, and that posture that screamed, "The world owes me something." Lily wiped her hands on her waitress uniform apron, her heart hammering. It was an accident, sir. Your friend stretched his leg right when I... Don't give me pathetic excuses. Will examined the ruined shirt with the same disdain someone might look at an insect. This shirt costs more than your 3-month salary. And this dinner... He gestured to the other men at the table, all $5,000 suits and watches that cost more than cars, is to close a $50 million deal. Congratulations, waitress. You may have just ruined months of negotiation. The entire restaurant had transformed into a silent theater. Lily felt every head turn, smartphones being discreetly pointed in their direction. Her face burned with humiliation, but something inside her, maybe the same stubbornness that made her work 3 jobs to pay for college, refused to bow down. "You know what, sir?" Lily straightened her shoulders, her voice coming out stronger than expected. "Maybe if you and your Harvard buddies didn't treat this place like your personal playground, accidents like this wouldn't happen. Maybe if you remembered that people like me exist, people who actually work, not just inherit everything from daddy, you'd have a minimum of basic consideration." The silence in the restaurant became sepulchral. The men at Will's table exchanged tense glances. One of them murmured something about, "Can't believe she said that." Will took a step toward Lily, his eyes blazing with something between disbelief and fury. "You just gave me a morality lesson? You?" Someone had to. The words came out before Lily could control herself. "From the way you treat people, I bet no one ever had the courage to tell you that you're a complete..." "Lily May Thornton," the voice thundered through the restaurant like a Category 5 hurricane. Lily turned to see a tiny woman with silver hair marching toward them like a general on a mission. Margaret Maggie Rose Blackwell was 72 years old, 5 feet tall, and had the commanding presence of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Grandma Maggie?" Will blinked, completely disarmed. "What are you doing here?" "Dining, obviously." Maggie stopped beside Lily, her hazel eyes sparkling with something that looked like malicious amusement. "And apparently I arrived just in time for the show." She examined Will from head to toe, shaking her head with theatrical disapproval. "William Ashford, you're acting like a spoiled child in the middle of a public restaurant. Your mother would be mortified." Will opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. "Grandma, you don't understand. This person here, this young lady," Maggie corrected with emphasis, "obviously had a small accident. Accidents happen, dear. Manners apparently do not." Lily watched the scene like she was watching a surreal movie. The older woman turned to her with a smile that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. "Dear, what is your full name?" Lillian May Thornton, ma'am." "Thornton?" Maggie savored the name like fine wine. "The Thorntons from Magnolia Street?" "Yes, ma'am. My father, Robert Thornton, he worked at your textile mill." Something changed in Maggie's face. Her expression became softer, almost maternal. "Bobby Thornton is your father? Oh dear." She took Lily's hands between hers, which were surprisingly strong. "He was one of the best men who ever worked for our family. When he got hurt in the accident..." "Grandma," Will interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Can we resolve this later? You have nothing more important than correcting your rudeness, William." Maggie turned to him with eyes that glinted dangerously. "In fact, I think it's time you learned some lessons about responsibility and consequences." Lily felt a chill run up her spine. There was something in the lady's voice that sounded like the noise before a storm. "You know what, dear?" Maggie squeezed Lily's hands once more, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "I think you and my grandson have much more in common than you imagine. Actually," she paused, as if a brilliant idea had just occurred to her. "I have a proposal that could solve all our problems." Will frowned. "Grandma, what are you scheming?" "Scheming? Me?" Maggie opened an angelic smile that fooled no one. "Dear grandson, I simply believe that some people need to learn to value what they have. And sometimes—" She looked directly into Lily's eyes, who felt like the woman could read her soul. "Destiny needs a little help." The restaurant remained in sepulchral silence, everyone waiting for the next move. Lily had the disturbing feeling that she had just become a piece in a much more complex game than she had imagined. And from the expression on Will Blackwell's face, a mixture of horror and fascination, he was beginning to suspect the same thing. The Blackwell estate, where legends are born and pride dies. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackwell mansion's breakfast room, casting long shadows across Italian marble floors that had witnessed 3 generations of family drama. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared the estate for Hurricane Maggie in full scheming mode. "You want me to what?" Will's coffee cup clattered against its saucer, sending drops of Colombian blend across the morning edition of the Charleston Business Journal. He stared at his grandmother, as if she'd suggested he donate his trust fund to charity and become a monk. Maggie Rose Blackwell sat primly at the head of the mahogany table, buttering her toast with the precision of a surgeon and the satisfaction of someone about to detonate a social nuclear bomb. "Marry her, darling. It's really quite simple." "Simple?" Will's voice cracked like a teenager's. "Grandmother, I've known this waitress for exactly 12 hours, and 10 of those she's been unconscious. Oh, if only he knew what I have planned for the engagement party," Maggie thought, hiding her grin behind her teacup. "The ice sculpture alone will be worth the inheritance I'm spending on this little production." "Unconscious because you," Maggie pointed her butter knife at him with accusatory precision, "caused her to faint when Harrison and your father showed up at her apartment at 6 a.m. with legal documents thicker than a phone book." Will ran his hands through his dark hair, a gesture that usually made Charleston debutantes swoon, but now just made him look deliciously unhinged. "I didn't ask Dad to threaten her with lawsuits. I was going to handle it quietly, pay for the dry cleaning, maybe throw in a couple hundred for the emotional distress." "A couple hundred?" Maggie's eyebrows shot up to her silver hairline. "William Ashford Blackwell, that girl's father, broke his back working in our mill to support his family. She's working 3 jobs to pay for nursing school while taking care of her sick mother. And you think a couple $100 would fix the humiliation you put her through? Not to mention the delicious irony that she has no idea her future husband is about to become the most whipped man in Charleston history," Maggie added silently, taking another sip of Earl Grey to hide her smirk. "So your solution," Will said slowly, as if speaking to someone mentally impaired, "is to force us into marriage? What is this, the 1800s? Oh, sweetheart." Maggie's voice turned deadly sweet, the tone that had made senators wet themselves and CEOs reconsider hostile takeovers. "Nothing about this marriage will be forced. You're going to beg to marry that girl before I'm done with you." Will leaned back in his chair, finally catching on that he was dealing with a master manipulator in pearls and cashmere. "What did you do?" "What didn't I do would be a shorter list," Maggie thought gleefully, mentally reviewing her morning's work. 3 calls to the Charleston Society reporters, 2 strategic lunch invitations, and 1 very interesting conversation with the Junior League president about that sweet Thornton girl who's been so unfairly treated. "Well," Maggie began innocently, "I may have mentioned to a few people that the Blackwell family is concerned about our public image after last night's incident." "Define a few people." "Oh, just Margaret Sotheby from the Post and Courier, Linda Weatherby from Charleston Society magazine, and Carol Ann Pemberton from—" "The Junior League president?" Will's voice hit notes that would make opera singers jealous. "Grandmother, do you have any idea what you've done? Carol Ann Pemberton is basically the Facebook of Charleston high society." Exactly, my dear naive grandson. By noon, every mama with an eligible daughter will be calling to express their concern about the Blackwell family's reputation. And by evening, they'll all be praying for that poor, sweet girl who got mixed up with our terrible family. I simply explained, Maggie continued with the innocence of a lamb planning world domination, that we Blackwells take responsibility for our actions, and that you, being the gentleman I raised you to be, naturally want to make amends. Will stared at her, comprehension dawning like a particularly ugly sunrise. You're boxing me in. I'm giving you an opportunity to grow up. Maggie's voice lost its playful edge, becoming the steel wrapped in silk tone that had built a textile empire. That girl has more grace in her little finger than you've shown in your entire privileged life. She stood up to you when no one else had the courage, and instead of respecting that strength, you let your pride turn it into a circus. Plus, she's absolutely perfect for taking you down a peg or 12, Maggie added mentally, remembering the fire in Lily's eyes when she'd faced down Will at the restaurant. That girl has spine. She'll need it to survive what I have planned. Will pushed back from the table, beginning to pace like a caged panther. Even if I agree to this insanity, which I'm not, what makes you think she'd say yes? The girl hates me. Oh, darling. Maggie's smile turned positively wicked. She doesn't hate you. She hates what you represent. There's a difference, and it's exactly the difference that's going to make this marriage work. Not to mention the little fact that I've already had Harrison draw up a contract that will make her family's financial problems disappear overnight. The girl may have pride, but she's not stupid enough to let that pride destroy her family's future. Will stopped pacing, a look of growing horror creeping across his aristocratic features. You've already talked to her, haven't you? Visited, actually. Lovely little apartment, though the roof seems to leak in 3 places. Met her mother, charming woman, though she clearly needs better medical care than Medicaid provides. And her father? Maggie shook her head sadly. Poor man can barely walk. But he was trying to fix that leaky roof himself because they can't afford a contractor. The manipulation was masterful, and they both knew it. Will's jaw clenched as he recognized the trap closing around him with surgical precision. You're blackmailing me with my conscience. I'm giving you a chance to discover you have one. And I'm going to have the most entertaining 6 months of my life watching you fall completely, helplessly, devastatingly in love with a girl who's going to turn your carefully ordered world upside down and shake all the arrogance right out of it. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 9 times, each note seeming to echo the finality of Will's situation. He looked at his grandmother, really looked at her, and saw not the sweet old lady who'd spoiled him with cookies and bedtime stories, but the brilliant strategist who'd turned a small textile business into a southern empire. What happens if I refuse? Maggie's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Oh, sweetheart, you won't refuse. Because at 11 o'clock this morning, Lily Mae Thornton is coming here for brunch to discuss the terms of your engagement. And when she walks through that door in her best dress, which I suspect isn't much but will be perfect, you're going to remember that you're a Blackwell. And Blackwells, she thought with vicious satisfaction, always get exactly what they deserve. Will stared at his grandmother, finally understanding that he'd been outmaneuvered by a master. But what terrified him most wasn't the trap she'd laid. It was the tiny part of him that was actually curious to see Lily Mae Thornton again, even if it killed him. When Southern hospitality meets calculated chaos, Lily Mae Thornton stood at the wrought iron gates of the Blackwell estate, clutching her grandmother's vintage purse so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The mansion loomed before her like something out of Gone with the Wind, all white columns, sweeping verandas, and the kind of old money elegance that made her thrift store dress feel like a costume. What the hell am I doing here? The question had been echoing in her head since Mrs. Blackwell's surprising visit that morning, armed with legal documents, medical bills mysteriously marked paid in full, and an offer that was either salvation or the devil's bargain wrapped in Chanel perfume. Miss Thornton, a butler who looked like he'd stepped out of Downton Abbey, appeared at the gate. Mrs. Blackwell is expecting you for brunch. Of course she has a British butler, Lily thought, following him up the circular drive. Probably imported him specially to make people feel inferior. Inside the mansion was a museum of generational wealth, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than her family's house, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, and Persian rugs that looked like they'd been woven by angels with trust funds. Every step on the marble floors echoed like a judgment. "Lily, darling." Maggie Blackwell swept into the foyer like a perfectly coiffed hurricane, wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than Lily's monthly rent. "You look absolutely lovely." "That dress is darling. Vintage, isn't it?" She knows exactly how much this dress cost at Goodwill, Lily realized. But Maggie's smile was so genuinely warm it was hard to take offense. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Blackwell, though I'm still not entirely sure why." "Oh, pish-posh, call me Maggie, and you're here because we have a situation to discuss." Maggie linked arms with her like they were old friends. "William is waiting in the breakfast room. Fair warning, he's been pacing like a caged tiger all morning. It's really quite entertaining." They walked through a hallway lined with family portraits, each face more aristocratic and intimidating than the last. Lily felt like she was walking to her execution, if executions were held in rooms that smelled like gardenias and old money. "I should have stayed home. I should have torn up those papers and told this family to go to hell." But then she thought of her mother's medical bills, her father trying to fix their leaky roof with a broken back, and her own student loans that felt like a mountain she'd never climb. Sometimes pride was a luxury poor people couldn't afford. The breakfast room was a symphony of morning light and understated elegance, French doors opening onto manicured gardens, a table set with china that probably had its own insurance policy, and Will Blackwell standing by the windows looking like a Ralph Lauren ad for tortured air having existential crisis. He turned when they entered, and Lily felt that same unwelcome flutter in her stomach she'd experienced at the restaurant. Damn him for being so annoyingly attractive, even when he looked like he wanted to throw himself off the nearest balcony. "Lily." His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the way his eyes did a quick scan from her head to her toes. "You came. Your grandmother can be very persuasive." Lily kept her voice equally neutral, though her heart was doing things that definitely weren't neutral. Persuasive like a hurricane is breezy, she thought, remembering Maggie's morning visit armed with legal documents and emotional manipulation worthy of an Oscar. "Wonderful. Now that we're all here, let's discuss the engagement." Maggie settled into her chair like a queen holding court. "William, stop lurking by the windows like a Gothic novel hero. Sit." Will moved to the table with all the enthusiasm of a man walking to the electric chair. He pulled out Lily's chair, a gesture so automatic it was clearly ingrained since birth, then took his seat across from her like they were about to negotiate a hostile takeover. Which, come to think of it, we kind of are. "Now then," Maggie continued, pouring coffee from a silver service that probably required its own staff to maintain. "I've taken the liberty of handling some preliminary arrangements. The engagement party will be next Saturday at the Charleston Country Club." "Next Saturday?" Lily's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. "Mrs. Black, Maggie, I haven't even said yes yet." Will leaned forward, his blue eyes sharp with something that might have been hope. "Exactly. Grandmother, you can't just plan our entire lives without—" "Can I?" Maggie's smile was all sweetness and steel. "Lily, darling, your family's medical bills are paid, your father's insurance claim has been mysteriously expedited, and there's a very generous college fund that could appear for your nursing program. William, your trust fund requires you to be married by 30 to access the full inheritance, something you've conveniently ignored for the past 2 years. Jesus Christ, she's thought of everything." Lily stared at the woman who looked like every sweet Southern grandmother ever born, but negotiated like a mob boss in pearls. "You're blackmailing us, both of us. I'm providing solutions to problems you both have." Maggie spread jam on her biscuit with the calm efficiency of someone defusing a bomb. "William needs to learn humility and responsibility. You need financial security, and a way to help your family. And Her eyes twinkled with mischief that made Lily's stomach drop. "I need great-grandchildren before I die." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with one of the crystal butter knives. Will was staring at his grandmother like she'd grown a second head. and Lily was trying to process being part of someone's reproductive planning. Great-grandchildren, Will said slowly. You want us to? Eventually, yes. Though let's start with you two, learning to have a civil conversation without setting anything on fire. This woman is absolutely insane, Lily thought, and I'm actually considering saying yes. But the memory of her father's proud face crumbling when he couldn't fix their roof, of her mother pretending the chest pains were just heartburn because they couldn't afford another doctor's visit, of her own dreams of nursing school getting further away with every bill that came in the mail. What exactly would this engagement involve? Lily asked, hating herself for not walking out. Maggie's smile turned triumphant. 6 months of public courtship, a wedding that will be the social event of the Charleston season, and after that? She shrugged elegantly. We'll see how you two get along. Will was looking at Lily now with something that might have been respect mixed with horror. You're actually considering this? You're actually considering it too? Or you would have left already. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, the pretense fell away. Two people caught in the same trap, trying to decide if they were cellmates or enemies. He's not as much of a complete asshole as I thought, Lily realized with dismay. Those eyes actually look human. If I agreed to this insanity, Will said carefully, what would the terms be? Maggie pulled out a leather portfolio with the efficiency of a lawyer presenting evidence. I'm so glad you asked. Lily, darling, you'll move into the estate immediately. Separate wing, naturally, your virtue intact, and begin learning the social graces necessary for a Blackwell wife. William, you'll begin actually working at the company instead of just collecting dividends, and you'll treat Lily with the respect due your fiancé. Separate wing. Thank God. I was starting to picture some kind of arranged marriage nightmare where he expected conjugal rights immediately. And if we can't stand each other? Lily asked. Then you'll learn to fake it very convincingly. Maggie's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent 70 years navigating Southern society. Because once this engagement is announced, backing out will destroy both your reputations. Mine too, for that matter, which is why I'm confident you'll both make it work. Mutually assured social destruction. Brilliant. Will was studying Lily like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Why would you agree to this? You could just take the money and run. Because, Lily said quietly, meeting his stare head-on, my family needs more than just money. They need security. They need to know that if something happens to me, they'll be taken care of. And because... She paused, surprised by her own honesty. Because I'm tired of being afraid all the time. Afraid of bills, afraid of the future, afraid that one emergency will destroy everything we've worked for. Something shifted in Will's expression. Surprise, maybe even admiration. And you think marrying someone you hate will solve that? I think marrying someone who can afford to solve that will solve that. Whether I hate you or not is negotiable. Did I just flirt with him? What the hell is wrong with me? Maggie was practically vibrating with satisfaction, like a conductor whose orchestra had finally hit the right note. Excellent. Then it's settled. William, you'll propose properly at the engagement party. I've already ordered the ring. Lily, darling, we'll need to go shopping for your wardrobe, and both of you will begin appearing in public together starting tomorrow. Tomorrow? Will's voice cracked again. The Charleston Maritime Foundation Gala. Perfect opportunity to introduce Charleston society to your new romance. Maggie stood up, clearly considering the meeting concluded. Lily, I'll have Margaret pick you up at 10 for shopping. William, try not to do anything stupid between now and then. As she swept out of the room, her voice drifted back. Oh, and children? Try to look like you actually like each other. The cameras will be everywhere. Left alone, Will and Lily stared at each other across the ruins of their independent lives. So, Will said finally, I guess we're engaged. I guess we are. Lily stood up, smoothing down her vintage dress. Try not to look so thrilled about it. Try not to look like you're planning my murder. Despite everything, Lily felt her lips twitch toward a smile. I make no promises about that. And God help me, I think I'm actually looking forward to tomorrow night. When shopping becomes psychological warfare, this is torture, Lily muttered, standing in the middle of Bellman's boutique, Charleston's most exclusive dress shop, while 3 stylists circled her like fashionable vultures. Actual, literal torture. Margaret, call me Maggie. Blackwell sat in a velvet chair like a general commanding troops, sipping champagne at 10:30 in the morning and directing the transformation of Lily Mae Thornton into someone who could convincingly pass for Will Blackwell's fiancée. Though honestly, Maggie thought with delicious satisfaction, the girl is naturally stunning. All she needs is the right packaging to make my grandson fall completely off his high horse. Torture? Darling, this is art. Maggie gestured with her champagne flute as stylist number 1 held up a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than Lily's car. We're creating a masterpiece. We're creating a lie, Lily corrected, trying not to flinch as stylist number 2 measured her waist with the precision of a scientist. I'm going to show up at this gala looking like someone I'm not, pretending to be in love with someone I barely know, lying to an entire room of people. Welcome to Charleston High Society, sweetheart. Half those people have been lying about their feelings for decades. Maggie's eyes twinkled with mischief. The other half are lying about their bank accounts. Plus, you won't be pretending much longer, she added silently, remembering the way Will's expression had shifted during brunch, from horror to grudging respect to something that looked suspiciously like genuine interest. That boy's been bored out of his mind with debutantes who worship the ground he walks on, a girl who challenges him, who sees right through his entitled nonsense. He won't stand a chance. Try this. Stylist number 1, whose name was apparently Francesca, and who spoke with an accent that could have been French or just pretentious, thrust the midnight blue dress at Lily. The color will make your eyes look like sapphires. Lily disappeared into the dressing room, and Maggie heard the rustling of expensive fabric mixed with creative cursing that would have made a sailor proud. Mrs. Blackwell? Francesca approached with the reverent air of someone about to suggest spending someone else's money. Perhaps we should consider the Valentino. It just arrived from Paris. Show me. The dress was a work of art, emerald green silk that seemed to capture light and hold it with a neckline that was elegant rather than scandalous, and a silhouette that would make angels weep with envy. It was also, Maggie noted with glee, exactly the shade of green that made Will lose his train of thought during board meetings. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. How much? Maggie asked, though she honestly didn't care if it cost more than a small country's GDP. 12,000. We'll take it. And the shoes. And whatever accessories Francesca thinks will make my future granddaughter-in-law look like she belongs on the cover of Vogue. Because if I'm going to play matchmaker, I'm going to do it properly. Besides, the look on William's face when he sees her in this dress will be worth every penny. The dressing room door opened, and Lily emerged in the midnight blue dress looking like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. But Maggie had to admit, the girl was absolutely stunning. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, the color made her skin glow, and her natural grace turned what could have been costume into couture. You look beautiful, Maggie said sincerely. I look like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. Lily turned to examine herself in the 3-way mirror, her expression conflicted. This dress costs more than most people make in 6 months. And tonight you'll be wearing it to an event where the champagne costs more than most people make in a week. It's all relative, darling. Though I do appreciate that she's not throwing herself at the opportunity to spend my money. Most girls her age would be in heaven right now. Why are you doing this? Lily asked suddenly, meeting Maggie's eyes in the mirror. Really? Not the story about wanting great-grandchildren or teaching Will responsibility. Why? Maggie set down her champagne, considering her answer carefully. The girl deserved honesty, or at least a version of it. Because, she said finally, I've watched my grandson become someone I barely recognize, entitled, dismissive, isolated by his own arrogance. He's surrounded by people who tell him what he wants to hear, who laugh at his jokes because of his bank account, who would marry him for his name even if he were the most boring man alive. All true. Also, I'm bored out of my mind, and this is the most fun I've had in years. And you think forcing him to marry me will fix that? I think putting him in a situation where his money and name don't matter, where he has to actually earn someone's respect and affection, might remind him of the man he used to be, the man he could still become. Lily stared at her for a long moment. And what about me? What if this ruins my life? What if it saves it? Then you'll survive it, Maggie said simply. You're stronger than you know, Lily May. Stronger than any of those girls Will's dated before. They would have said yes to this arrangement for the money and status. You're saying yes for your family. There's a difference. Before Lily could respond, Francesca appeared with the Valentino dress draped over her arms like a religious artifact. For the gala tonight, Maggie announced. Try it on. I already have a dress. You have a very nice dress that will make you look pretty. This dress will make you look like a woman who could bring William Ashford Blackwell III to his knees. Maggie's smile turned predatory. Trust me, there's a difference. Plus, the poor boy hasn't had a real challenge in his entire privileged life. Time to see what he's made of. 20 minutes later, Lily emerged from the dressing room, and even Francesca, who had dressed European royalty, audibly gasped. The Valentino dress was perfection. The emerald green silk moved like water, the cut was modern but timeless, and the way it fit Lily's figure was nothing short of architectural genius. But more than that, something had shifted in Lily's posture. She stood taller, moved with more confidence, like the dress had reminded her of her own power. Holy shit, Lily breathed, staring at her reflection. Language, darling, Maggie murmured, but she was grinning like a chess master who'd just achieved checkmate. Though I completely agree with the sentiment. William is going to take one look at her and forget how to form sentences. This is going to be absolutely delicious. They spent the next hour selecting shoes, Jimmy Choo, jewelry, family emeralds that had been gathering dust, and a clutch, Hermes, because why not go completely overboard? By the time they were finished, Lily looked like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale written by someone with exceptionally expensive taste. Now, Maggie said as they prepared to leave, let's discuss strategy for tonight. Strategy? Darling, you're not just attending a gala. You're making your debut as a Blackwell. Every person in that room will be watching, judging, and probably reporting to someone else. You need to be prepared. Also, you need to be prepared for the fact that my grandson is going to be completely blindsided by how gorgeous you look, and I cannot wait to see him stumble over his own tongue. They settled into the back of Maggie's Bentley, shopping bags filling the trunk like expensive evidence of the morning's conspiracy. First rule, Maggie began. Never let them see you sweat, literally or figuratively. These people can smell insecurity from across a ballroom. Second rule, remember that half of them inherited their money just like Will did. You're not less than them because you worked for yours. You're better. Third rule, when in doubt, smile mysteriously and let them wonder what you're thinking. Works every time. Fourth rule, don't let my grandson's inevitable foot-and-mouth disease discourage you. The boy hasn't had to actually court a woman in his entire life. They've all been throwing themselves at him since he hit puberty. And Will? Lily asked, her voice carefully neutral. Any rules for dealing with him? Maggie's smile turned wicked. Oh, sweetheart. Just be yourself. That's what got you into this mess, and it's exactly what's going to get you out of it. By which I mean it's exactly what's going to make him fall head over heels in love with you, though you don't need to know that part yet. As the Bentley pulled up to Lily's apartment building, Maggie handed her a small velvet box. For tonight, they belonged to Will's great-grandmother, another woman who married into this family and shook things up considerably. Inside were emerald earrings that probably belonged in a museum, delicate and stunning and worth more than everything Lily owned combined. I can't wear these, Lily said weakly. What if I lose them? Then we'll buy new ones. They're just earrings, darling. Pretty expensive earrings, but still just jewelry. Maggie patted Lily's hand with genuine affection. You, on the other hand, are irreplaceable. Don't forget that tonight. Especially don't forget it when William inevitably says something stupid because he's nervous. The boy has never had to work for anything in his life. including female attention. This should be educational for him. As Lily climbed out of the car, arms full of bags and head spinning with instructions, Maggie called after her. "Oh, and Lily, when Will sees you tonight, try not to let him know how much you enjoy watching him suffer. At least not at first. Though honestly, watching him suffer is going to be half the fun." The car pulled away, leaving Lily standing on the sidewalk, looking like someone who'd just survived a very expensive tornado. Through the rear window, Maggie saw her shake her head and laugh, a sound of pure disbelief mixed with something that might have been excitement. Phase 1 complete, Maggie thought with satisfaction, already mentally preparing for Phase 2. Now let's see if my grandson is ready to meet his match. This was going to be the most entertaining evening she'd had in decades. When fake love crashes into real feelings at 90 Mauer, and Will Blackwell stood at the entrance of the Charleston Harbor Resort ballroom, adjusting his bow tie for the 15th time, and checking his Patek Philippe watch with the nervous energy of a man about to jump out of an airplane without being entirely sure his parachute would open. The Charleston Maritime Foundation Gala was in full swing. 500 of the city's most influential people dressed in their finest, champagne flowing like water, and enough diamonds to power a small city glittering under crystal chandeliers. It was exactly the kind of event Will had attended hundreds of times before, the kind where he could navigate conversations about yacht racing and hedge funds in his sleep. So why did he feel like he was about to face a firing squad? Because tonight you're not just Will Blackwell, trust fund prince, he reminded himself. Tonight, you're Will Blackwell, fake fiancé to a woman who might actually be more dangerous than your grandmother. "William!" Caroline Pemberton Hayes materialized beside him in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and barely contained curiosity. "I heard the most interesting news about you and some girl." "Lily," Will corrected automatically. "Her name is Lily. And she's not some girl, though I'm not entirely sure what she is." "Yes, Lily. Thornton, isn't it? From Magnolia Street?" Caroline's smile was all teeth and no warmth, the kind of expression that meant she'd already gathered enough gossip to fuel Charleston society for months. How absolutely unexpected. Before Will could formulate a response that wouldn't end up in tomorrow's society pages, the ballroom doors opened, and every conversation in a 50-foot radius died mid-sentence. Lily Mae Thornton walked into the room like she owned it. The Valentino dress moved with her like liquid emerald, catching the light with every step. The family emeralds at her throat and ears turned her skin luminous, and her hair, swept up in some complicated style that probably took hours, revealed the elegant line of her neck. But it wasn't the expensive clothes or jewelry that made every head turn. It was the way she carried herself, like a queen arriving at her own coronation. Holy fucking hell. Will's champagne glass slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent ballroom. He barely noticed. She's... His brain, usually razor-sharp in business negotiations and social maneuvering, had apparently short-circuited. All he could process was emerald silk, sapphire eyes, and the devastating realization that Lily Mae Thornton was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. And she's supposed to be my fiancé. Fake fiancé. Very fake. Extremely, completely, totally fake. So why did the sight of her make his chest tight and his pulse race like he'd just run a marathon? Will? Lily had reached him somehow, though he couldn't remember his feet moving. Her voice was soft, meant only for him, and he caught a hint of vanilla and jasmine that made his head spin. "You're staring." "I'm staring because you look like every fantasy I didn't know I had, wrapped in a dress that should be illegal." "I'm admiring," he managed, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "You look devastating, perfect, like you're going to ruin my life in the best possible way." "Expensive?" she suggested with a wry smile that shouldn't have been as attractive as it was. "Stunning," he said honestly, then immediately wanted to kick himself for the slip of sincerity. "Get it together, Blackwell. This is fake. She's here because your grandmother is blackmailing both of you, do not forget that." But when Lily's cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment, All his careful logic went straight out the window. "Shall we?" He offered his arm with the automatic courtesy bred into him since childhood, trying to ignore the way her touch sent electricity up his arm. This is going to be a very long evening. They moved into the crowd, and Will found himself in the surreal position of introducing his fake fiancée to people who'd known him since he was in diapers. The conversations followed a predictable pattern: shocked surprise, barely concealed curiosity, and the kind of social calculations that happened behind polite smiles. "Will, darling," Margaret Sotheby from the Post and Courier appeared like a shark scenting blood. "And this must be the infamous Lily. Tell me, how did you two meet?" Over spilled wine and mutual humiliation, Will thought, but Lily stepped in smoothly. "At Chez Laurent," she said with a smile that gave away nothing. It was memorable. Memorable like the Titanic was memorable. How romantic. And the engagement, so sudden. "When's the wedding?" Will opened his mouth to deflect, but Lily's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on his arm. "We're still planning," she said easily. "You know how these things are. So many details to coordinate." She's good at this, Will realized, with a mixture of admiration and unease. Maybe too good. They made it through 3 more similar conversations before Will needed air. He guided Lily toward the terrace, grateful for the relative quiet of the Charleston harbor breeze. "You're a natural," he said, leaning against the balcony railing. "At this. The lying, I mean." "Great. Way to make it sound like an insult." Lily laughed, a sound that was equal parts amusement and exhaustion. Years of waiting tables teaches you to handle difficult people with a smile. Though I have to say, your friends make drunk college kids look sophisticated. "Our friends," he almost corrected, then caught himself. "They're not her friends. This isn't her world, and after 6 months, she'll go back to hers, and I'll go back to mine." The thought bothered him more than it should have. "They're not all terrible," he said defensively. "Some of them actually work for their money." Wow, high praise. There was something in her tone, not quite mockery but close, that sparked his temper. "You know, not everyone who has money is automatically evil. Some of us actually try to do something useful with it. Like you with your charitable foundation that you've completely ignored for the past year." Lily turned to face him fully, her eyes flashing in the moonlight. "And what useful things do you do with yours, Will, besides buy $12,000 suits and wine that cost more than most people's rent?" Shit. She's got you there. "I donate to charity," he said weakly. "Your accountant donates to charity, for tax write-offs. That's not the same thing. How the hell does she know about my tax write-offs? You've been researching me. Your grandmother gave me a very thorough briefing on the Blackwell family financial empire, including your complete lack of involvement in any of it beyond cashing checks." Will felt heat rise in his face, embarrassment mixed with anger and something that might have been shame. "I don't have to justify my life choices to you." "No," Lily said quietly, "you don't. But you might want to justify them to yourself." Before he could respond, the terrace doors opened, and his grandmother appeared with the timing of someone who'd been watching from inside. Which she probably was. "There you are. The photographer from Charleston magazine wants pictures of the happy couple." Maggie's smile was pure innocence, which meant she was up to something particularly diabolical. Of course there's a photographer. Of course. The next hour was a blur of posed smiles and careful touches, Will's hand on Lily's lower back, her fingers intertwined with his, both of them playing their parts with the skill of seasoned actors. But somewhere between the formal portraits and the candid shots, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Lily laughed at something he whispered in her ear. A real laugh, not the polite society version. Maybe it was the moment when she unconsciously leaned into him during a particularly long photo session, and he caught that vanilla jasmine scent again. Maybe it was the way she handled every social landmine with grace, while keeping that slightly sardonic edge that made him want to know what she was really thinking. Whatever it was, by the time they finished with the photographer, Will was in serious trouble. She's not supposed to be this interesting. She's supposed to be a problem to solve, a social obligation to endure. She's not supposed to make me want to be a better man. One more dance, Maggie announced as the band struck up something slow and romantic. For the cameras. For the cameras. Right. This is all for show. But when Will took Lily in his arms on the dance floor, her hand warm in his, her body fitting against him like she belonged there, it didn't feel like a show. It felt like coming home. This is dangerous, Lily murmured, so quietly only he could hear. What is this? Us. Pretending. Her eyes met his and he saw his own confusion reflected there. It's starting to feel real. It's starting to feel real because it is real. At least for me. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, he heard himself say. What the hell are you doing, Blackwell? This is supposed to be fake. This is supposed to be temporary. This is supposed to be... Will. Lily's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through all his mental noise. What are we doing? Falling. We're falling, and I'm not sure either of us knows how to stop. Before he could answer, the song ended, and reality crashed back in. Cameras flashed, people applauded, and they stepped apart like actors taking their final bow. But the electricity between them lingered, crackling in the space where their hands had been, promising complications neither of them was prepared for. 6 months, Will thought desperately. I just have to survive 6 months of this without doing something stupid. One look at Lily, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with the same dangerous awareness he was feeling, told him he was already failing. We're both in serious trouble. When denial meets front-page reality, Lily Mae Thornton woke up in Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than her monthly salary, in a guest room the size of her entire apartment, staring at a ceiling painted with cherubs that looked suspiciously judgmental. What the hell happened last night? The memories came flooding back in devastating clarity. The dress, the gala, the way Will had looked at her like she'd personally hung the moon and stars. And that dance. God. That dance where she'd practically melted in his arms like some romance novel heroine with no backbone. It's starting to feel real. Did I actually say that? Out loud? To his face? A soft knock on the door interrupted her spiral of mortification. Miss Lily? Mrs. Blackwell asked me to bring you coffee and the morning papers. Papers. Plural. Oh shit. The maid, whose name was apparently Consuela and who treated the delivery of newspapers like she was handling radioactive material, arranged the coffee service on the sitting area table and discreetly withdrew. Lily wrapped herself in a silk robe that probably cost more than her car and approached the papers like they might explode. The Charleston Post and Courier had them on the front page of the lifestyle section. The headline read, Blackwell airs surprise romance, with a photo that made Lily's breath catch in her throat. It was from the dance. Will's hand on her lower back, her face turned up toward his, both of them looking at each other with expressions that were intimate, real, like two people who were absolutely, completely lost in each other. We look like we're in love. Actually, genuinely head over heels in love, which was insane because they barely knew each other. Because this was all fake. Because Will Blackwell was an arrogant, entitled man who called me stunning and meant it, who looked genuinely ashamed when I called him out on his privilege, who dances like he was born to hold me. Stop it. Stop it right now. But the photos didn't lie. In every single shot, they looked like a couple who couldn't keep their hands off each other. The formal portraits were elegant and proper, but their body language screamed sexual tension. The candid shots were even worse. Little touches, shared glances, the kind of chemistry that couldn't be faked. Because it wasn't fake. Not last night. Not in that moment. The article was a masterpiece of social journalism, managing to be both complimentary and deeply investigative. It traced Lily's background with the thoroughness of a FBI dossier. Daughter of former Blackwell Textiles employee Robert Thornton, nursing student, worked multiple jobs to support her family. But instead of making her sound like a gold digger, the article painted her as a modern Cinderella, Hardworking, devoted to family, and surprisingly sophisticated for someone from humble beginnings. Maggie's handiwork, Lily realized. She fed them exactly the story she wanted them to tell. Charleston Magazine had gone full fairy tale with their coverage, featuring a 2-page spread of the professional photos, with a headline that made Lily cringe. Love at First Sight, the Blackwell-Thornton romance that has Charleston talking. Love at first sight. If spilling wine and mutual humiliation counted as love at first sight, then sure. But looking at the photos again, really looking, Lily had to admit there was something there. Something that had started as mutual antagonism and transformed into, what? Attraction? Chemistry? The kind of dangerous awareness that made smart people do incredibly stupid things? Like agreeing to fake marry someone you're starting to have real feelings for. A second knock interrupted her descent into panic. "Come in," she called, expecting Consuela with more coffee. Instead, Will Blackwell walked through the door, and Lily's heart forgot how to beat properly. He looked like he'd slept about as well as she had, hair disheveled, jaw unshaven, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that should have made him look casual but instead made him look dangerously, devastatingly attractive. He was carrying his own coffee mug and a tablet, and his expression was unreadable. He's seen the photos, too. "Morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Mind if I sit? We need to talk. We need to talk." The 4 words every woman dreads hearing from a man she's definitely not supposed to be falling for. "Sure." Lily gestured to the chair across from her, grateful for the coffee table between them. Physical distance seemed important right now, especially when he looked like sex in a t-shirt and her brain was already compromised. Will sat down and placed his tablet on the table, screen facing her. It showed a Google search for Will Blackwell engagement, with approximately 50,000 results. "We're trending," he said dryly. Hashtag Blackwell wedding is number 3 in Charleston, and there are already betting pools on when the wedding will be. Of course there are betting pools, because this is Charleston, where people will literally gamble on anything. "The photos are," Lily began, then stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Convincing?" Will suggested. "Damning." They stared at each other across the coffee table, both apparently struggling with the same realization. What had happened between them last night was now public record, frozen in high-definition photography for all of Charleston to analyze. "About what you said," Will started, then stopped, running a hand through his already messy hair. "On the dance floor. About it feeling real." Lily's stomach dropped. Here it comes. The "let's keep this professional" speech. The "don't get confused about what this is" lecture. "I think," he continued carefully, "we need to establish some ground rules, boundaries, to avoid complications." Complications? Is that what we're calling the way my pulse races every time he looks at me? "Agreed," Lily said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "This is a business arrangement. Fake engagement, fake relationship, real benefits for both parties. No emotional entanglements. No matter how amazing he smells or how perfectly I fit in his arms." "Right. Exactly." Will nodded firmly, like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. "We maintain the public charade, fulfill the terms of my grandmother's arrangement, and keep our personal feelings out of it." Personal feelings, so he has them too. "Professional distance," Lily agreed. "Clear boundaries. No confusion about what this is." No confusion. They nodded at each other like two people who had just negotiated a very reasonable, very logical solution to their mutual problem. The effect was ruined when Will's gaze dropped to her lips for just a second too long, and Lily felt heat pool low in her stomach. "We are so screwed." "There is one thing," Will said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "The engagement party's in 5 days. Grandmother has invited half of Charleston and will need to be convincing. Convincing. Like last night when I practically melted in his arms on a dance floor. How convincing. Engaged couple convincing. Affectionate. Comfortable with each other. Like two people who are planning to spend the rest of their lives together. the rest of their lives. The phrase hung in the air between them like a dare. I can handle that, Lily said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. Can you? Will's eyes met hers, and for a moment the careful professional distance they'd just established evaporated completely. She saw heat there, want, and something that looked dangerously like genuine affection. I think, he said slowly, that's going to be the problem. Before either of them could examine that statement too closely, the door burst open and Hurricane Maggie swept in with the force of a Category 5 storm. Good morning, lovebirds. She was practically glowing with satisfaction, carrying her own coffee and wearing an expression that suggested she'd just won the lottery. I see you've seen the papers. Aren't the photos gorgeous? You two look absolutely perfect together. She knows. She knows exactly what's happening, and she's enjoying every second of it. Grandmother, Will said with the careful patience of someone defusing a bomb, we were just discussing boundaries, I hope. Very important in any relationship. Speaking of which, Maggie settled into the remaining chair like a queen holding court. I've had the most wonderful idea for the engagement party. Oh God. What now? The theme will be Enchanted Garden. We'll transform the entire back lawn into a fairy tale setting, string lights, flower arches, a dance floor under the stars. Very romantic, very intimate, very designed to make us forget this is all fake. And, Maggie continued with the enthusiasm of someone planning a military campaign, I thought it would be lovely if you two shared some of your how we fell in love story with the guests. Just a little speech during dinner, something personal and heartfelt. Will and Lily exchanged panicked glances. Their how we fell in love story involved spilled wine, public humiliation, and approximately 12 hours of knowing each other before being blackmailed into an engagement. Personal and heartfelt. Right. We'll think of something, Lily said weakly. I'm sure you will, Maggie said with a smile that suggested she already knew exactly what they would think of, and it would be exactly what she wanted them to think of. After all, the best love stories are the ones that surprise everyone, including the people living them. She stood up, mission apparently accomplished. Oh, and children? You might want to practice being affectionate. 500 guests will be watching your every move, and some of them are quite good at spotting fake romance. Practice being affectionate. With Will, who looks like sin in a t-shirt and makes me forget my own name when he touches me. We're not just screwed. We're completely, utterly, devastatingly screwed. As Maggie swept out, leaving behind only the faint scent of Chanel and impending doom, Will and Lily stared at each other in the wreckage of their carefully constructed boundaries. 5 days, Will said finally. 5 days. Lily agreed. 5 days to figure out how to fake being in love with someone you're actually falling for. What could possibly go wrong? When rehearsing fake love becomes dangerously real. This is ridiculous, Lily muttered, standing in the middle of the Blackwell Estate's sun-drenched conservatory, while Will maintained what he probably thought was a professional distance of exactly 6 feet. We're adults. We can fake being affectionate for one evening without requiring rehearsals. Liar. You couldn't even look at him during breakfast without your pulse doing gymnastics. Will adjusted his already perfect posture, looking like a man facing execution by firing squad. Grandmother specifically said we needed to practice. She knows these people. They'll spot fake chemistry from across the ballroom. As opposed to the very real chemistry that's been burning holes in the air between us for the past 3 days. It had been 72 hours since their boundaries conversation, and those boundaries had been working about as well as a screen door on a submarine. Every shared meal became an exercise in avoiding eye contact. Every casual conversation turned into careful navigation around topics that might reveal too much, and every accidental touch, reaching for the same coffee cup, brushing hands while walking through doorways, sent electricity shooting through both of them like they'd grabbed a live wire. Professional distance, my ass. Fine, Lily said, crossing her arms and immediately regretting it when Will's gaze dropped to her chest for a nanosecond before snapping back to her face. What exactly did you have in mind? A choreographed routine? Synchronized swooning? Good. Be sarcastic. Sarcasm is safe. Sarcasm doesn't lead to doing stupid things like kissing your fake fiancé. Will ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell when he was nervous. I thought we could start with basic physical comfort, hand-holding, standing close together, the kind of casual intimacy that engaged couples display in public. Basic physical comfort. He makes it sound like a medical procedure. Right. Simple. Lily unfolded her arms and tried to look like a woman who wasn't having impure thoughts about a man she was supposed to be fake dating. Hand-holding. How hard can that be? Famous last words. Will stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could smell his cologne. Some expensive combination of cedar and citrus that made her want to bury her face in his neck and breathe deeply. Professional boundaries, remember? No emotional entanglements, remember? He's an arrogant, entitled man who's been volunteering at the children's hospital every Tuesday for the past month without telling anyone, according to what you overheard Consuela telling the cook. Shit. Your hand, Will said, extending his palm toward her like he was offering to shake hands with a potentially rabid animal. Lily looked at his hand, long fingers, perfectly manicured nails, the kind of hands that had never done manual labor, but looked strong enough to hold a woman against him while he... Stop. Thinking. Right. Now. She placed her hand in his, and the effect was immediate and devastating. His fingers closed around hers warm and sure, and every nerve ending in her body suddenly decided to hold a rave. It's just hand-holding. Teenagers do this. It's not supposed to feel like... Too formal, Will said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. We look like we're about to dance the waltz at a Victorian cotillion. He shifted their grip, intertwining their fingers, and Lily forgot how to breathe properly. His thumb brushed across her knuckles in what was probably meant to be a casual gesture, but felt like the most intimate thing that had ever happened to her. We are in so much trouble. Better? He asked, and she realized he was studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed, like he could see every inappropriate thought she'd been having, which, judging by the way his pupils dilated slightly, might not be entirely unwelcome. Much, she managed, proud that her voice came out steady. Very natural. Natural like a lightning strike is natural, technically accurate but likely to cause significant damage. They stood there for a moment, hands linked, both pretending this was a perfectly normal rehearsal for a perfectly fake engagement, while the air between them crackled with enough sexual tension to power the mansion. This is practice, Lily reminded herself firmly. This is not real. This is not... Now what? She asked, because the silence was getting dangerous and her willpower was apparently made of tissue paper. Casual contact, Will said, and she could hear the careful control in his voice. Engaged couples touch each other unconsciously. A hand on the shoulder, fingers trailing along an arm. Small gestures that indicate familiarity. Familiarity. Right. Not intimacy. Not the kind of touching that makes you wonder what those hands would feel like on bare skin. Show me, she said, then immediately regretted it when Will's eyes darkened. Bad choice of words. Very bad choice of words. Will released her hand, which felt like a loss, and moved to stand beside her, facing the conservatory's wall of windows that overlooked the garden. His hand settled on her lower back, light but possessive, the kind of touch that said, mine, without words. Lily's knees went weak. It's fake. This is fake. He's practicing. You're practicing. This is not real attraction, this is just... Will's thumb moved in a small circle against her spine, and Lily's brain short-circuited completely. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, oh. Like this, Will said quietly, his breath warm against her ear because somehow he'd moved closer without her noticing. Protective but not possessive. Intimate but appropriate for public. There is nothing appropriate about what this is doing to me. Lily turned her head to respond and found herself inches from his face, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, close enough to count his ridiculously long eyelashes, close enough to discover that his perfectly controlled expression was hiding the same barely leashed want she was feeling. He feels it too. The realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't one-sided attraction. This wasn't her imagination or wishful thinking, or the result of too many romance novels. Will Blackwell, arrogant, entitled, completely wrong for her Will Blackwell, wanted her just as much as she wanted him. And we're supposed to fake this for 5 more months. Lily, Will said, and her name sounded different in his voice. Rougher, more real. Say something. Say anything. Make a joke. Step away. Remember why this is a terrible idea. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "This is dangerous." Understatement of the century. Extremely, he agreed, but his hand was still on her back, still burning through the silk of her blouse, and he wasn't moving away. Neither of them was moving away. "We should," Lily started, then lost track of what they should do because Will's free hand had come up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline with devastating gentleness. "We should stop. We should remember this is fake. We should not be looking at each other like we want to combust on the spot. We should practice," Will said, but his voice had gone low and husky, and they both knew that wasn't what either of them was thinking about. Practice kissing. That's what he means. We should practice kissing because engaged couples kiss and, oh shit, we're going to have to kiss. In public, at the engagement party, in front of 500 people. The engagement party, Lily said weakly. People will expect us to kiss, Will finished, and the word hung between them like a dare. Yes. Just a practice kiss. Just to make sure we can do it convincingly. Just to, who the hell am I kidding? Once, Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just to make sure we can do it without looking like strangers. Or like two people who want to tear each other's clothes off. Once, Will agreed and leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, to remember all the reasons this was a spectacularly bad idea. Instead, she rose up to meet him halfway. Their lips touched and the world exploded. It was supposed to be a simple kiss. A practice kiss. A let's make sure we can do this, convincingly kiss. Instead, it was devastation in the form of soft lips and gentle pressure, and the kind of chemistry that poets wrote bad verses about. Will's hand slid into her hair, tilting her head for better access, and Lily's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. This is not a practice kiss. This is not a practice anything. Will's tongue traced her lower lip, and Lily made a sound that was definitely not appropriate for a fake engagement practice session. She opened for him, and the kiss deepened into something that was hungry and desperate and completely, utterly real. We're supposed to be practicing, we're supposed to be professional. We're supposed to be completely lost. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, they stared at each other in the wreckage of every boundary they'd tried to establish. That was, Will started, then stopped, apparently as incapable of rational thought as she was. Practice, Lily finished weakly. That was just practice. Liar. That was the kind of kiss that ruins women for other men. Right. Practice. Will's thumb traced her swollen lips, and she saw her own dazed expression reflected in his eyes. Very convincing. Convincing. Right. Because we're such good actors. A throat cleared behind them, and they sprang apart like teenagers caught making out by their parents. Maggie Blackwell stood in the conservatory doorway, wearing an expression of such pure satisfaction that she might as well have been holding a mission accomplished banner. She planned this. She knew exactly what would happen if she told us to practice being affectionate. Don't mind me, Maggie said cheerfully, moving past them to examine a particularly vibrant orchid. I was just checking on the flowers. They seem to be thriving in all this heat. Heat. The woman is absolutely diabolical. Grandmother, Will started, his voice still rough. We were just practicing. Maggie finished with a smile that suggested she knew exactly what kind of practicing they'd been doing. Excellent work, very convincing. I'm sure Saturday will be perfect. Saturday. The engagement party. Where we'll have to do this again in front of everyone, while pretending it means nothing. While knowing it means everything. As Maggie bustled out, leaving them alone with the ruins of their self-control, Will and Lily stood in careful silence, both trying to process what had just happened. "We should establish new rules," Lily said finally. "Definitely. Stricter boundaries. No more practice kissing." "Absolutely not." They nodded at each other with the desperate earnestness of two people trying to convince themselves they could resist temptation. 3 days until the engagement party. 3 days to figure out how to fake being in love when the real thing was becoming impossible to deny. What could possibly go wrong? When fake love meets real feelings in front of 500 witnesses, the Blackwell estate had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale fever dream. Thousands of white string lights draped between ancient oak trees, creating a canopy of stars over the back lawn. Flower arrangements that probably cost more than most people's cars dotted every surface, and a dance floor had been installed under a pavilion that looked like it belonged in a Disney movie. All of this, Lily thought, adjusting her emerald green cocktail dress for the 100th time, for a fake engagement. She stood at the French doors leading to the terrace, watching Charleston's elite arrive in a parade of designer gowns and smugness. Mercedes and BMWs lined the circular drive like expensive breadcrumbs, and she could see photographers from 3 different society magazines already positioning themselves for the best shots. 500 people. 500 people who are about to watch me pretend to be in love with a man I'm definitely not falling for. Liar. The past 3 days had been an exercise in mutual torture disguised as wedding planning. Every meeting with florists, caterers, and musicians became an opportunity for accidental touches and meaningful glances. Every discussion about seating arrangements turned into standing too close and forgetting how to breathe. And every attempt to maintain their stricter boundaries lasted approximately 30 seconds before one of them found an excuse to be in the same room as the other. Professional distance, they'd said. No more practice kissing, they'd said. They'd lasted exactly 1 day before Will had needed to discuss something urgent about the menu while she was trying on dresses, and somehow that conversation had ended with her pressed against the dressing room wall and his mouth doing things to her neck that should have been illegal in the state of South Carolina. "We're going to hell. Both of us. Express train. First-class tickets." Nervous? Lily turned to find Will approaching from behind, and her heart did that stupid fluttering thing it had been doing for the past week. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, all sharp lines and elegant sophistication, like he'd stepped out of a James Bond movie. But it was the way he was looking at her that made her forget how to breathe properly, like she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Like he wanted to cancel the party and spend the evening finding out what she was wearing under her dress. Stop. Thinking. About. What's under your dress. Terrified, she admitted, smoothing her hands down her skirt in a gesture that wasn't nervous at all, except it completely was. 500 people, Will. 500 people who are going to be watching our every move, analyzing our every touch, looking for any sign that this isn't real. Any sign that this is too real. Will stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "Hey," he said softly, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture that was becoming dangerously familiar. "We've got this. We're good at this, remember? Too good. That's the problem." His thumb traced along her jawline, and Lily's knees went weak. Again. Because apparently her knees had decided to become completely unreliable whenever Will Blackwell touched her. "Besides," he continued, his voice dropping to that low, rough tone that made her want to do inappropriate things in inappropriate places, "all we have to do is what we've been doing. Just be ourselves. Be ourselves. Right. Because ourselves apparently means 2 people who can't keep their hands off each other, despite claiming this is all fake." "Will," she started, then stopped because he was looking at her mouth with an intensity that made her forget whatever reasonable thing she'd been about to say. "Don't kiss him. Don't kiss him. Do not kiss him in front of the French doors where anyone could see and—" "There you are." Maggie's voice cut through the tension like a machete through silk. "Guests are arriving, and the photographer wants pictures of the happy couple before the crowd gets too thick." Saved by the grandmother. Sort of. Maggie swept them outside with the efficiency of a general deploying troops, and suddenly they were in the middle of a carefully orchestrated photo session. The photographer, a thin man with an artistic ponytail who probably charged more per hour than most people made in a month, positioned them in various romantic poses throughout the garden. "Perfect," he called out as Will spun Lily around near the fountain, her dress flaring out like something from a magazine spread. "Now kiss her like you mean it. Kiss her like you mean it. Because that's been the problem. We mean it too much." Will's hand settled on her waist, pulling her close, and Lily saw her own nervous excitement reflected in his eyes. "Just for the photos. Just for show. Just like we practiced." Their lips met, and the lie exploded into 1,000 pieces. This wasn't a practice kiss or a photo op kiss or any kind of fake demonstration. This was Will Blackwell kissing her like she was his salvation, like she was the answer to questions he didn't even know he'd been asking. His hands tightened on her waist, pulling her closer, and she melted into him like she'd been designed specifically to fit in his arms. Camera flashes went off around them, but they might as well have been alone in the universe. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the photographer was practically vibrating with excitement. Magnificent, absolutely magnificent, the passion, the chemistry. These are going to be the most beautiful engagement photos I've ever taken. Chemistry. Right. Because we're such good actors. The rest of the photo session passed in a blur of fake smiles and real touches, Will's hand never leaving her body, their chemistry crackling in the warm Charleston evening air. By the time they finished, guests were mingling throughout the garden, champagne was flowing, and the party was in full swing. Time for the main event. Time to convince 500 people that we're madly in love. Time to stop pretending we're not. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maggie's voice carried across the garden with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." The crowd quieted, turning toward the small stage that had been set up near the dance floor. Will and Lily found themselves ushered forward, hands linked, smiling at an audience that included Charleston's mayor, 3 congressmen, and enough old money to buy a small country. No pressure. "As you all know," Maggie continued, beaming like a woman who'd just won the lottery, "we're here tonight to celebrate the engagement of my grandson William and his beautiful fiancée Lily, and I thought it would be lovely if they shared with us the story of how they fell in love." The story of how they fell in love. The story they'd spent 3 days trying to craft and had never quite managed to make believable. Probably because the real story involved fake blackmail and sexual tension that could power the state grid. Will stepped forward, his hand warm and steady in hers, and when he looked out at the crowd, he was every inch the confident heir who'd been giving speeches since he could walk. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying easily across the garden. "When Grandmother asked us to share our story, Lily and I weren't sure where to begin. Because the truth is..." He paused, turning to look at her with an expression that made her heart stop. "He's going off script. We didn't plan this. What is he doing?" "The truth is," Will continued, his eyes locked on hers, "I didn't know I was looking for love until I found it. I thought I had everything I needed. Family, success, all the advantages money can buy. But I was wrong. What are you doing, Will? This isn't what we rehearsed. This isn't..." "The night I met Lily," he said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles, "she challenged everything I thought I knew about myself. She looked at me and didn't see my bank account or my family name. She saw me, the real me, underneath all the privilege and pretense. Oh God, he's telling the truth. He's actually telling the truth. And I realized," Will's voice dropped, becoming more intimate despite the hundreds of people listening, "that I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. Until she woke me up." The crowd was dead silent, hanging on every word, but Lily barely noticed them. All she could see was Will, looking at her like she'd hung the moon and stars, saying things that sounded suspiciously like he means them. "Lily," he said, turning fully toward her now, ignoring the audience completely, "you make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. You make me want to earn the faith you have in me, even when I'm not sure I deserve it. Stop. Stop right there. Don't say what I think you're about to say. I love you, Will said simply, and the words hit her like a freight train. I love your strength, your integrity, the way you light up a room just by walking into it. I love that you're not afraid to call me on my bullshit, and I love that you see potential in me that I didn't even know existed. He loves me. He just told 500 people that he loves me. And God help me, I love him too. The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless and reeling. Somewhere along the way, between the fake engagement and the practice kisses and the way he looked at her like she was precious, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably, devastatingly in love with Will Blackwell. I'm in love with my fake fiancé. I am so screwed. The crowd was applauding, but Lily barely heard them. All she could hear was her own heartbeat thundering in her ears and the echo of Will's words. I love you. Say something. You're supposed to say something. Everyone's waiting. She started, then stopped, looking out at all those expectant faces. Charleston society waiting to hear her romantic declaration. The photographers poised to capture every word. Maggie, practically glowing with satisfaction. I could lie. I could give them the pretty speech we rehearsed. I could keep this fake. Instead, she looked at Will, really looked at him, and saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes. Screw it. I used to think, Lily said, her voice stronger than she felt, that love was supposed to be easy, comfortable, safe. A lie. Love is terrifying and complicated and completely insane. But Will taught me that real love isn't safe. It's challenging and unexpected and sometimes inconvenient. She squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. He taught me that the right person doesn't complete you. They inspire you to complete yourself. God, I sound like a greeting card. But it's true. It's all true. Will makes me braver than I am on my own. He makes me want to take chances, to believe in possibilities I never dared dream of. He makes me feel like I can be anyone, do anything, as long as he's beside me. Please let this not be a mistake. Please let him mean what he said. So yes, she said, looking directly into his eyes. I love you too. All of you. Even the parts that drive me crazy. The crowd erupted in applause, but Lily didn't hear them. Because Will was looking at her like she'd just given him the greatest gift in the world, and when he leaned down to kiss her, she forgot they had an audience at all. This kiss was different from all the others. This wasn't practice or performance or pretense. This was real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the crowd was on their feet, applauding and cheering like they'd just witnessed the greatest love story ever told. Which, come to think of it, maybe they had. Well, Maggie said into the microphone, her voice thick with emotion, I think that settles any questions about whether these two are truly in love. Truly in love. With each other. For real. We are so screwed, and I couldn't be happier about it. As the party swirled around them, congratulations and champagne toasts and enough romantic chaos to fuel Charleston's gossip mill for months, Will and Lily stood in the middle of it all, hands linked, staring at each other like they'd just discovered fire. Did we just, Lily started, blow our cover completely? Will finished. Yeah, pretty much. Any regrets? Will's smile was answer enough, but he said it anyway. None whatsoever. Famous last words. But as he spun her around the dance floor under the stars, surrounded by 500 witnesses to their very public declaration of love, Lily decided that some mistakes were worth making. Even if Maggie Blackwell had orchestrated the whole thing from the beginning. Especially then. When the morning after changes. Everything Lily woke up to sunlight streaming through silk curtains and the absolutely terrifying realization that she'd publicly declared her love for Will Blackwell in front of half of Charleston society. Oh God, oh God, oh God. What did we do? She sat up in the guest room bed, her engagement party dress from the night before draped over a chair like evidence of her complete loss of sanity. Every detail came flooding back with crystal clarity. Will's speech, her response, the way he'd looked at her like she'd hung the moon, the kiss that had made 500 people disappear. "I love you." He said he loved me, in front of everyone. And I said it back. Because I meant it. Because I'm completely, hopelessly, devastatingly in love with a man I was supposed to be fake dating for 6 months. A soft knock interrupted her spiral of panic. "Miss Lily? Mrs. Blackwell would like to see you in the library when you're ready." Maggie. Of course. Time for the post-engagement party debriefing with the woman who orchestrated this entire emotional disaster. 20 minutes later, Lily found herself in the Blackwell Library, a room that looked like it belonged in Oxford, complete with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the kind of leather furniture that probably cost more than most people's houses. Maggie was sitting in a wingback chair drinking coffee from bone china and looking like the cat who'd not only caught the canary but had also inherited the entire aviary. She knows. She knows exactly what happened last night and she's enjoying every second of it. "Good morning, darling," Maggie said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Coffee? You look like you could use it." I look like a woman who just realized she's fallen in love with her fake fiancé and has no idea what to do about it. "Where's Will?" Lily asked, accepting the coffee with hands that were definitely not shaking. "Emergency board meeting. Something about a merger that needed his immediate attention." Maggie's smile turned mysterious. "Though I suspect he's also processing last night's revelations." Revelations. That's one way to put it. "About last night," Lily began, then stopped, not sure how to explain that she'd accidentally fallen in love during a fake engagement designed to teach Will humility. How do you tell someone's grandmother that you've completely lost control of a situation that was supposed to be purely transactional? "Magnificent performance," Maggie said cheerfully. "Simply magnificent. The guests were absolutely enchanted. I've already received 17 calls this morning from people raving about the romance, the chemistry, the obvious deep love between you two." Deep love. Right. Because we're such good actors. Mrs. Blackwell, Maggie, I think we need to discuss what happens now. Last night got a bit intense. Intense like a nuclear explosion is intense. Intense? Maggie's eyebrows rose with theatrical innocence. "Darling, that was the most genuine display of affection I've seen at a Charleston engagement party in 30 years. You two looked absolutely radiant together. Because we weren't acting anymore." Lily set down her coffee cup and decided to go for honesty. "I think I may have developed actual feelings for Will, which wasn't part of the original arrangement. Understatement of the century. I've developed feelings like the Pacific developed water." Maggie's smile turned triumphant. "Oh, sweetheart, you think that wasn't part of the arrangement?" Something cold settled in Lily's stomach. "What do you mean? Please don't say what I think you're about to say." "Lily, darling," Maggie said gently, leaning forward like she was about to share state secrets. "Did you really think I chose you randomly? Did you honestly believe that spilling wine on my grandson was just a coincidence? No. No, no, no. She did not plan." "You planned the restaurant," Lily said slowly, pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "You knew I worked there. You knew Will would be there that night. She set us up. From the very beginning, she set us up. I may have mentioned to William that Chez Laurent had an excellent new wine selection," Maggie admitted with the casual air of someone discussing the weather. "And I may have been aware that you worked Thursday evenings in that section of the restaurant." "May have been aware." "Right. You orchestrated the whole thing. The spilled wine, the humiliation, the legal threats, all of it was planned. I should be furious. I should be outraged. I should be impressed because this woman played us like virtuosos." Maggie's expression turned serious. "Lily, I've watched my grandson become increasingly isolated, increasingly arrogant, increasingly disconnected from any sense of real purpose. He was dating vapid debutantes who wanted his name and his money, surrounding himself with people who told him what he wanted to hear, becoming the kind of man I barely recognized, All true. But still, so you decided to fix him by throwing a waitress at him? I decided to fix him by introducing him to a woman who wouldn't be impressed by his bank account. A woman with integrity, strength, and the backbone to challenge him. A woman who would see the man he could become instead of just accepting the man he was. A woman who would fall in love with him despite every reason not to. And you knew we'd... Lily gestured helplessly, trying to find words for the emotional chaos of the past 2 weeks. Fall in love? I hoped, but I couldn't guarantee it. Maggie's voice turned gentle. Chemistry can't be manufactured, darling. Attraction can't be forced. What happened between you and William, that's real. I just provided the circumstances. Provided the circumstances, like a matchmaking puppet master. Does Will know? Lily asked, dreading the answer. Not yet, though I suspect he's beginning to piece it together. William is many things, but he's not stupid. Great. So I get to be the one to tell him that his grandmother manipulated us both into falling in love, assuming he actually has fallen in love and wasn't just caught up in the moment last night. As if summoned by her thoughts, the library door opened and Will walked in, still wearing his business suit but looking like he'd been through an emotional blender. His hair was messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. His tie was loosened and his expression was a mixture of confusion, determination, and something that might have been panic. He's beautiful even when he looks like hell. I am so screwed. Grandmother, he said without preamble, we need to talk. About last night. About this whole arrangement. About what the hell you've been... He stopped when he saw Lily, and the expression that crossed his face was so raw, so vulnerable, that she felt her heart crack. He regrets it. He regrets everything he said last night. Lily, he said, her name coming out like a prayer or a curse. I've been looking for you. To tell me it was all a mistake. To explain that he got caught up in the moment. I meant it, he said suddenly, crossing the room in 3 long strides. Everything I said last night. Every word. I know it's insane and complicated and probably the worst timing in the history of bad timing, but I meant every goddamn word. Oh, thank God. So did I, Lily whispered, standing up to meet him halfway. Which is terrifying because this was supposed to be fake and now it's the most real thing I've ever felt, and I have no idea what we're supposed to do with that. Word vomit. Complete emotional word vomit in front of his grandmother. Will's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. We're supposed to figure it out together. We're supposed to stop pretending this is temporary and start building something permanent. Permanent. He wants permanent. Even though your grandmother manipulated us into this situation? Will's eyes sharpened. What do you mean manipulated? Shit. I was not supposed to be the one to tell him. Maggie cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps I should explain. You planned it, Will said slowly, his hands dropping from Lily's face as realization dawned. The restaurant, the accidental meeting, all of it. Here we go. William, Maggie started. You manipulated both of us. You researched Lily. You engineered the situation. You blackmailed us into this engagement so we'd be forced to spend time together. Technically accurate. Because you knew we'd fall for each other, Lily added quietly. Will stared at his grandmother like he'd never seen her before. You played matchmaker with my life, with both our lives. Yep, that about sums it up. And it worked, Maggie said simply. You're in love. She's in love. You're both better people when you're together than you were apart. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Like love is a military operation. Though knowing Maggie, maybe it is. Will was quiet for a long moment, processing the revelation that his entire relationship had been orchestrated by his 72-year-old grandmother. Lily held her breath, waiting for him to decide whether he was furious about the manipulation or grateful for the results. Please don't let this ruin everything. Please don't let him decide that manufactured circumstances mean manufactured feelings. Finally, Will started to laugh. Not the polite social laugh she'd heard him use at parties, but real laughter. The kind that came from genuine amusement and maybe a little hysteria. "You," he said to Maggie, "are absolutely diabolical. Diabolical, but effective. And you," he turned to Lily, "are the best thing that's ever happened to me, whether my grandmother planned it or not. Oh, thank God, thank God, thank God, thank—" "But from now on," Will continued, pulling Lily into his arms, "we make our own choices. No more manipulation, no more schemes, no more grandmother-orchestrated romance. No more fake anything." "Agreed," Lily said, melting into his embrace. "Just us. Figuring this out together." "Just us," Will confirmed, then kissed her with the kind of passion that made Maggie discreetly avert her eyes. Real kisses, real feelings, real future. Finally, when they broke apart, both breathing hard, Maggie was smiling like a woman who'd just conquered the world. "So," she said brightly, "shall we start planning the wedding? I was thinking June would be lovely." Some things apparently never change, but as Will groaned and Lily laughed and the three of them began the complicated process of turning a fake engagement into a real relationship, Lily couldn't bring herself to mind Maggie's continued meddling. After all, the woman had a pretty good track record, even if her methods were absolutely insane. 6 months later, when fake becomes forever. 6 months later. The real wedding. The Cathedral of St. Luke and St. Paul had seen its share of Charleston society weddings, but nothing quite like this. 2,000 white roses lined the Gothic arches, string quartets played Pachelbel's canon with the precision of angels, and enough Carolina aristocracy filled the pews to populate a small kingdom. But none of that mattered to Lily Mae Thornton, soon to be Lily Mae Blackwell. As she stood in the bridal suite staring at herself in a mirror that probably cost more than her first car. This is really happening. This is actually, genuinely, completely real. The wedding dress was a masterpiece of French lace and silk, designed by someone whose name Lily couldn't pronounce but whose talent was undeniable. It fit her like a dream, making her feel like the kind of woman who belonged in Gothic cathedrals and society pages. 6 months ago, I was a waitress who spilled wine on Charleston's most eligible bachelor. Now I'm about to marry him. In front of 800 people. No pressure. A knock on the door interrupted her spiral of pre-wedding nerves. "Come in," she called, expecting to see one of the army of wedding coordinators who'd been buzzing around all morning. Instead, Maggie Blackwell swept in wearing a silk mother-of-the-bride dress in dusty rose and an expression of such pure satisfaction that she looked like she'd personally created love itself. Which, come to think of it, maybe she had. "Oh, darling," Maggie breathed, pressing a hand to her heart. "You look absolutely radiant, like a fairy tale princess, but real. Real." After 6 months of the most intense relationship of her life, Lily was finally starting to believe that this was indeed real. The past half year had been a whirlwind of discovering that Will Blackwell was nothing like the arrogant heir she'd first met. Yes, he was still privileged and occasionally needed his ego checked, but he was also brilliant, funny, surprisingly tender, and completely devoted to becoming the man she'd seen in him from the beginning. Plus, he'd quit his useless board positions and started actually working at the family foundation, turning it from a tax write-off into something that actually helped people. And he'd been volunteering at the Children's Hospital for over a year without telling anyone. And he made her coffee every morning exactly the way she liked it. And when he kissed her, the world stopped. I'm so gone for this man, it's not even funny. "Nervous?" Maggie asked, settling into the velvet chair by the window with the grace of someone who'd been attending society weddings since before Lily was born. "Terrified," Lily admitted. "Not about marrying Will. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. But about—" She gestured toward the window, where they could hear the murmur of 800 guests settling into their seats. "All of that. I'm still just a girl from Magnolia Street, and they're expecting a Blackwell bride. They're expecting perfection, and I'm just me." Maggie's expression turned gentle, the steel wrapped in silk facade dropping for a moment. "Lily, sweetheart, You've been a Blackwell bride since the moment you refused to let my grandson intimidate you. Family isn't about blood or money or how long your name has been in the social register. It's about the people who choose to love you and the people you choose to love back. Great. Now I'm crying, and the makeup artist is going to kill me. Besides, Maggie continued with a return of her trademark mischief, half those people out there inherited their money just like William did. The difference is, you earned your place in this family. You earned William's love. You earned mine. And you've certainly earned the respect of anyone with half a brain. She's right. I did earn this. I didn't marry Will for his money or his name. I fell in love with him despite those things. Though the money doesn't hurt when it comes to paying off student loans. Another knock interrupted them, and this time it was Will's younger sister Caroline, who'd flown in from Paris where she was studying art history and had immediately adopted Lily as the sister she'd always wanted. Lily, you look incredible. Caroline burst in with the energy of someone hopped up on wedding excitement and probably champagne. Will is absolutely losing his mind downstairs. He's paced a hole in the vestry floor and Dad had to physically restrain him from coming up here to see you. He's nervous too. Good. That makes me feel better. How does he look? Lily asked, because even though she'd seen him in his tuxedo during the final fitting, she needed to know. Like a man who's about to marry the love of his life and can't quite believe his luck, Caroline said with a grin. Also like he might throw up, but in a romantic way. Romantic nausea. My favorite kind. 5 minutes, ladies. The wedding coordinator's voice drifted through the door with the authority of someone who'd orchestrated more Charleston weddings than anyone could count. 5 minutes. 5 minutes until I walk down that aisle and promise to love Will Blackwell for the rest of my life. 5 minutes until fake becomes forever. Maggie stood up, smoothing her skirt with the precision of someone preparing for battle. Are you ready, darling? Am I ready to marry the man I love? Am I ready to become part of a family that's crazy and wonderful and completely devoted to each other? Am I ready to spend the rest of my life with someone who challenges me and supports me and makes me laugh until my sides hurt? I'm ready, Lily said and meant it completely. The cathedral. Where fairy tales come true. Will Blackwell stood at the altar of St. Luke and St. Paul, trying to remember how to breathe properly while 800 of Charleston's finest watched his every move. She's going to be beautiful. She's going to walk down that aisle and I'm going to forget how to speak English. Assuming she shows up. She'll show up. Right? She wouldn't leave me at the altar in front of 800 people and 3 different society photographers. Would she? Breathe, son. His father murmured from beside him. She's not going anywhere. Easy for him to say. He didn't fall in love with a woman who's too good for him during a fake engagement orchestrated by his manipulative grandmother. Though come to think of it, maybe he did. Mom's got some serious scheming skills of her own. The organ music swelled, and Will's heart stopped. The massive cathedral doors opened, and suddenly, there she was. Lily. His Lily. Soon to be Mrs. William Blackwell. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Robert Thornton, who'd insisted on walking despite his back problems, and looked prouder than any man had a right to be. But Will barely saw him. All he could see was Lily, radiant in white lace and silk, smiling at him like he was her salvation. She's beautiful. She's absolutely, completely, devastatingly beautiful. And she's choosing me. How did I get this lucky? When she reached the altar, Robert placed Lily's hand in Will's with the solemnity of someone passing on the most precious treasure in the world. Take care of her, he whispered, just loud enough for Will to hear. With my life, Will promised, and meant every word. The ceremony passed in a blur of traditional vows and personal promises, of rings that symbolized forever and words that bound 2 lives into one. But the moment that stopped Will's heart was when Lily looked directly into his eyes and said, with complete sincerity and 800 witnesses, Will, 6 months ago you were a stranger who annoyed me. Today you're the man I can't imagine living without. You challenge me to be braver, kinder, stronger than I ever thought I could be. You see the best in me even when I can't see it myself. Don't cry. Do not cry in front of 800 people. I promise to love you when you're charming and when you're impossible. I promise to call you on your bullshit and celebrate your victories. I promise to be your partner in all things, your equal in all ways, and your biggest supporter in every dream. Crying. Definitely crying. So much for dignity. Most importantly, Lily continued, her voice strong despite the tears in her eyes. I promise to choose you every day, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because loving you is the best decision I've ever made. Game over. Completely, utterly destroyed by his wife's wedding vows. Wife. Holy shit, she's going to be his wife. Will's own vows were probably beautiful. He'd spent weeks writing them. But all he could remember later was the way Lily smiled when he promised to love her. Whether our life is ordinary or extraordinary, whether our future is predictable or completely insane. Knowing us, it'll definitely be insane. I can't wait. You may kiss your bride, the minister said with the satisfied air of someone who'd just witnessed true love triumph over all obstacles, including manipulative grandmothers and fake engagements. Will cupped Lily's face in his hands, looking into her eyes one last time as her fiancé before he kissed her as his wife. This kiss was different from all the others. This wasn't practice or performance or the desperate passion of people falling in love. This was the promise of forever. When they broke apart, the cathedral erupted in applause, but Will barely heard it. All he could hear was Lily laughing. Pure joy and relief and the kind of happiness that made everything else disappear. We did it. We actually did it. Fake engagement, real love, and a manipulative grandmother who'd orchestrated the whole thing. Best wedding ever. The reception, where happily ever after begins. The Blackwell estate had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Again. Apparently Maggie had a thing for fairy tale themes, and since this was the real wedding, she'd gone completely overboard. 10,000 white roses, a 12-piece orchestra, champagne that probably cost more than some people's houses, and enough twinkle lights to be seen from space. Maggie doesn't do anything halfway. Lily and Will's first dance was to At Last by Etta James, and every person in attendance could see that these two people were absolutely, completely, devastatingly in love. The kind of love that made other people believe in fairy tales. But the moment that would be talked about for years in Charleston society circles was when Maggie Blackwell stood up during the toasts, champagne flute in hand, wearing an expression of such pure triumph that she looked like a general who just won the war of the century. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying easily across the reception tent. I'd like to propose a toast to the bride and groom. But first I have a small confession to make. Oh God, what now? Will and Lily exchanged glances that were equal parts love and terror. She's about to tell 800 people that she manipulated us into falling in love. 6 months ago, Maggie continued with the timing of a seasoned performer. My grandson was a successful, wealthy, completely arrogant young man who had everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. True. But ouch. And Lily was a hard-working, intelligent, completely wonderful young woman who deserved far better than she'd been given by life. Also true, but where is this going? So I may have arranged for them to meet. Understatement of the century. The crowd murmured with interest, leaning forward to catch every word of what was clearly going to be the scandal of the Charleston social season. I may have orchestrated a situation where my arrogant grandson would be forced to spend time with a woman who wouldn't be impressed by his bank account. I may have blackmailed them both into a fake engagement, hoping that proximity would lead to deeper feelings. She's actually admitting it. In front of everyone. Will is going to kill her. Or thank her. Possibly both. And I may have spent the past 6 months watching two people fall completely, helplessly, beautifully in love, despite their best efforts to maintain professional boundaries. Professional boundaries. Right. The crowd was eating this up. Charleston society loved nothing more than a good scandal, and this was gossip gold. So, Maggie raised her champagne flute higher, her smile turning absolutely wicked. Here's to William and Lily, who proved that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with a little creative intervention. Creative intervention, that's what we're calling it. To love that conquers all obstacles, including manipulative grandmothers who know what's best for their grandchildren, to couples who are brave enough to take chances on each other, and to the Blackwell family tradition of getting exactly what we want, even if we have to manufacture the circumstances to get it. The Blackwell family tradition of being absolutely diabolical. Cheers! The tent erupted in laughter and applause, and Will shook his head in amazement while Lily dissolved into giggles. Of course she'd turn our love story into a triumph of her own scheming. Of course she'd take credit for the whole thing. And honestly, she deserves it. Because as Will spun Lily around the dance floor under a canopy of stars, surrounded by family and friends who were celebrating their very real, very permanent, very happily ever after love story, he had to admit that Maggie's manipulative matchmaking had been the best thing that ever happened to him, even if her methods were completely insane. So, Lily said as they swayed together, her head on his shoulder, any regrets about marrying into the most manipulative family in Charleston? Any regrets about spending the rest of my life with the most amazing woman I've ever met? About having children who'll inherit Maggie's diabolical intelligence and Lily's incredible heart? About never having to pretend this is fake ever again? None whatsoever, Will said, kissing the top of her head. Though I'm terrified about what Maggie's going to do when she decides we need to give her great-grandchildren. Lily's laugh vibrated against his chest, warm and real and completely his. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, she said. Though, knowing your grandmother, she's probably already planning their engagements. Probably planning their engagements before they're born. Some things never change. But as the orchestra played and Charleston society celebrated the wedding of the century, Will and Lily Blackwell danced under the stars, completely in love and completely unaware that Maggie was already making notes about the best preschools for future Blackwell heirs. After all, it's never too early to start planning, especially when you're Maggie Blackwell, and love is your specialty. The end. 2 years later, when Lily announces she's pregnant and Maggie immediately starts planning the nursery, the godparent selection process, and the child's future spouse. Because some traditions never die. They just get passed down to the next generation. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance, but with Maggie as a great-grandmother and Will and Lily as parents, that kid is going to be absolutely unstoppable.